Hello everyone, and welcome to Autocrat. This is episode 26, Heracles / Hercules part 4, the Lernaean Hydra.
Yes, and this was a word, Lernaean that I found impossible to spell initially because of how many A's and E's there are everywhere. Well, this is the second of Heracles' tasks, and let's see if it goes as painlessly as the first, shall we?
We shall. We'll be relying on Gerber, Apollodorus, Diodorus, and the Theogony today. Let us start with Heracles came back to Argos to tell Eurystheus that he succeeded and was told to go to the marshland around Lerna.
Okay, so this is just after we saw off the Nemean lion, is it?
It is.
Okay.
A Hydra with 7 heads lived here, according to Gerber, although Diodorus says 100.
Right.
So there's either 7 heads, 100, or whichever number you want, really.
Yeah, I think we get into this a little bit more later down the line because of exactly what these heads are, but for now, it's a Hydra with a lot of heads.
Like the lion, it had been eating human and animal alike, and Heracles was told to kill it. Now, tell us a bit more about the Hydra itself. What is it? Who is it?
Well, the Hydra is a child of Echidna and Typhon. So Echidna and Typhon, if you remember from episode 3, had a lot of monster babies. The first of which was Orthus, the dog belonging to someone called Geryon, who I believe we meet later on in our story. Not this episode, but later on. Their second child was Cerberus, the dog of Hades in the underworld, and the third was the Hydra. The Theogony says that the Hydra was the mother of the Chimera, although Apollodorus says the Chimera is in fact the child of Echidna and Typhon. But no, it's a possibility that the Chimera is the child of the Hydra.
So, I seem to remember we said in episode 24 that the Nemean lion is either the child of Typhon or of Orthus and Echidna, right?
Yes, we did.
So this would make the Nemean lion either the full sibling or the half-sibling / nephew of the Hydra.
Yes, it's a complicated family tree.
I bet. Do go on.
Now, the Hydra used to forage in the plain to wreak devastation. And this is where we come back to the heads a little bit, because you asked me, well, what exactly is the Hydra, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is relevant to that, because Apollodorus says that it had 8 heads, 7 mortal and 1 immortal. This would somewhat tally with the 7 we just talked about above, which is given by Gerber. Maybe she just skipped out the immortal head, who knows? Diodorus says that there were 100 heads, but who knows, maybe 100 is just an exaggerated theatrical way of saying there were a lot of heads.
Probably. Hopefully.
Yeah. So we'll be going with 7 mortal heads, 1 immortal head. Heracles found the Hydra by its lair on a hill after driving there in his chariot beside the Amymone Springs. Do you want to take over what happened from there?
Yeah, of course. He lured it out by firing burning arrows. He gripped onto it, but the Hydra coiled around his foot.
Ooh.
Caving its skull in with his club didn't do anything, because once he got rid of one, another 2 sprung up.
Ah.
While Heracles was fighting it, Hera sent a giant crab which nipped Heracles on the feet all the while.
Okay, another challenge to deal with.
Because Hera does not like Heracles. The crab was dealt with pretty much immediately. That's even to an extent that Diodorus doesn't even mention it, because, it's just, it's a crab.
Wow, so Heracles was just annoyed and crushed it immediately.
Exactly.
Okay.
However, Hera then placed it in the sky as the constellation Cancer. And you can remember that probably. We might have mentioned it from our episode about the constellation.
Yes, I think we talked about it briefly when we were introducing the Zodiac.
Now, there is an issue when it comes to fighting the Hydra. Tell us about this issue.
Well, this is expanding on the problem that we mentioned that as soon as heads are dealt with, caved in or cut off, more of them appear. Gerber says that another 7 heads would reappear every time one was dealt with. Most of my sources say 2, so that's what I'm going with. Now, to visualise how big of a problem this really would be, we've got to talk about exponentials for a minute.
It's a math moment, guys, so bear with us.
Yeah. You didn't know the Hydra would unexpectedly have maths involved. Well, the joke's on you now. Let's say the Hydra starts off with just 1 head. You cut the head once, 2 of them are now present. You repeat this process, so 2 cuts total, there are now 4 heads, and so on. Let's just use some comparisons to see how quickly this would actually add up. There are 8.1 billion people in the world today, with our population going above 8 billion for the first time in November of 2022. There are also about 10 to the power of 11 or 12 galaxies in the observable universe, and finally 3.72 times 10 to the power of 13 cells in the human body.
Sure.
Now, why do I mention all of this? Well, 2 to the power of 33 as a number is a higher number than the number of people in the world today, meaning that 33 cuts would mean that you've already got more Hydra heads than there are people in the world.
Wow.
2 to the power of 34 goes above the number of galaxies in the universe, and 2 to the power of 39 goes above the number of cells in the human body. So basically, the laws of exponentials explain why everyone thought it was impossible to defeat this thing.
Yeah, I bet.
Heracles had been accompanied on this task by Iolaus, who wanted to see how well Heracles was doing. You can basically think of him as an intern or someone shadowing Heracles.
Yeah. As an introduction, Iolaus is the nephew of Heracles and the son of Iphicles.
Yes, the least favourite child we talked about right at the start of the Heracles episodes, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Iolaus was steering the chariot Heracles took to Lerna.
Okay.
Heracles asked him to set fire to some wood to burn the wound at the base of the neck when they were given to stop heads growing back.
Okay.
Now, do you think that would work?
Well, it seems an unorthodox solution to this problem, but I'm guessing that it does.
Well, Apollodorus says that now he could deal with the mortal heads and finally chopped off the immortal head.
Okay, so that did actually work. We've dealt with all the Hydra heads.
Exactly. Now, what did he do with that head?
Well, the immortal head was buried and had a big stone placed over the burial site. I don't know if that just means he wanted to make sure the Hydra head stayed in the ground, but who knows. This was all done next to the road through this region towards a city called Iolaus. And significantly, before he left, Heracles chopped up the Hydra and dipped his arrows in the blood of the beast.
Why would he do that for?
The blood of the Hydra was very, very toxic, to the extent that even a slight wound with Hydra blood coming into contact with it would mean instant death. One source also says this was the Hydra's gall, but seeing as the gallbladder stores bile and there's generally more blood about, and that's what I've seen in most of my sources, we're going with the fact that Hydra blood is toxic.
However, Aristeus, when he came back, saying, oh, I did this, said, well, sorry, but this task will not be counting towards the 10 he had to do, because he had help and he was supposed to do them alone.
Okay, that feels very petty.
It does a little bit, so I'm sorry, but task number 2 does not count.
No. We can put a big old cross next to that and slump our shoulders in defeat as we move on to the next one.
Exactly.
Now, as a final fact for today, Hydras are actually a real thing in the world of biology.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. Hydras are organisms related to jellyfish, and their method of reproduction is budding. As a consequence of this, Hydras exist in the modern day, which form part of bodies which have been undergoing growth for millions of years. I would assume that this budding process reminded people of the Lernaean Hydra's heads reappearing, and that that's where the name therefore came from. A 2014 paper did some calculations and worked out that a group of freshwater hydras could exist without reproducing for at minimum 14 centuries.
That's impressive.
Yeah. The freshwater hydra has attracted attention for not undergoing the process of aging. In some conditions, cells called interstitial cells, which are involved in budding and the creation of gametes, can basically indefinitely function as stem cells. Now, what are these? They are cells which are, comparatively speaking, not specialised to a particular function in the body. They can produce two specialised or unspecialised daughter cells, which can then differentiate. So basically, stem cells act as a kind of cell reservoir. But the main point for today is, hydras do in fact exist and have been attracting scientific attention.
That's very cool.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode, with that fact out of the way, so thank you all very much for listening.
Yeah, see you next week, everyone.
Yeah, have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was not the outro I was expecting. Yeah, it was fun. There were more surprising tangents I found I could take than I expected when I initially went into the story. I'm also surprised how irrelevant